Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and giallo enthusiasts. This is Tanner Leeser, your host for all things giallo here on The King in Giallo. Our next stop on our journey through giallo cinema is the third giallo film from Dario Argento, Four Flies on Grey Velvet, released in 1971. This video is an edited down version. Herein, you will find the overview portion of the full-length video. Coming next week will be the complete deep dive with the review and GialliTally. This video may be watched without any spoilers. Here is Four Flies on Grey Velvet Overview. Four Flies on Grey Velvet is an Italian and French co-production. The film is directed by Dario Argento, who also wrote the screenplay along with Luigi Cozzi and Mario Foglietti. The music is composed by Ennio Morricone. The cast includes Michael Brandon as Robert Tobias, Mimsy Farmer as Nina Tobias, Jean-Pierre Marielle as Arosio, Bud Spencer as Godfrey, aka God, Oreste Lionello as the Professor, Francine Racchette as Dalia, and Calisto Calisti as Carlo Morosi. The plot follows Roberto, the drummer of a prog rock band who over the past several days has had a strange man watching him. One night after a rehearsal, Roberto confronts the man in an empty theater, the result of which leads to the accidental stabbing and death of the stalker, which is photographed by a second mystery person from the balcony wearing what looks like a doll mask. Soon after the bizarre encounter, Roberto begins receiving phone calls and letters of the murder, prompting him to hire a private investigator named Arosio to help him discover who is behind all of this blackmail. As days go by, more and more of Roberto's friends end up being murdered, and he is made to be the prime suspect. Dario Argento at this time was on fire and was a giallo film director rock star. His first film, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, 1970, was a hit and had managed to bring this strange little genre to the forefront and prove that these types of films could both be a hit with audiences and critics and generate buckets of money for producers. His second film, The Cat o' Nine Tails, 1971, was also a big success for the young director, but the process was a nightmare for him due to the German co-financiers attempting to steal the movie out from under him and churn out something that was closer to a mere carbon copy of Bird. With this third film, and final of Argento's Animal trilogy, the director would find himself working with nearly unchallenged creative freedom by his financial backers. The stylistic elements seen in his second film, Cat, are further developed here, particularly in regards to the fragmented editing and the camera work. The editing contains bold cuts and betrays temporal logic, whereas the camera floats around like a fly, and slow motion is also incorporated in a powerful and effective way. In Cat, we saw broad strokes of these artistic choices, whereas in Bird, there was a much more subdued and traditional type approach to the filmmaking. Here, in Flies, the style is unleashed, but in a similar fashion to how Cat behaves as the bridge to Flies and its display of style, Flies itself would operate as a bridge to the wildly stylistic Deep Red in 1975. Contrary to the amazing style, the film suffers from weak characters with little development. Roberto is a lackluster anti-hero type whose attitude in the wake of the plot's events may be understandable, yet is no less endearing for an audience to follow and sympathize with. His wife Nina is something of an enigma, and her cousin, Dalia, is rather vapid and just sort of floats in and out of the story. The friends close to Roberto are leaning on the side of being artistic pseudo-intellectuals, or rather dilettantes, and they believe that they are fonts of wisdom and philosophical ideas. Now, these are intentionally portrayed as character flaws by Argento, but the balance is not quite there, and these characters instead just come off as annoying. He thankfully sidesteps this style of character writing in his next giallo films for the most part, but this sort of thing would be an ongoing fault which would plague several of his gialli to come. Writing intentionally flawed characters that just are not super great. In terms of the technical aspects of the film, it is gorgeous and competently arranged and executed. The opening, has been said, could be viewed as a precursor to music videos. Argento is known to have done a lot of unnecessary work on this film in order to achieve the shots he wanted to capture. He managed to use a high-speed camera which shot in 1,000 frames per second, compared to the industry standard 24 frames per second, in order for him to film the climax moment of the movie, which uses an insane slow-motion sequence intensified by the most haunting track ever composed by Morricone. Speaking of the maestro, Morricone's score is highly memorable for the nightmarish track which closes the film. However, the overall score for the movie is rather all over the place and not always in a good way. It is difficult to criticize Morricone, but considering his previous work in the genre, his scores for Bird and Cat overall are much better, and in this same year of 1971, his scores for Black Belly and Fifth Chord are likewise more competent and have a cohesiveness that binds them. Flies' score spans from being utterly otherworldly and sublime to being entirely generic and seemingly uninspired. I suppose it could be said that the unevenness of the soundtrack highlights and accentuates the closing track all the more. Morricone's work on this film would lead to a rift between the composer and the director, causing them to not work together until 1996, nearly 25 years later, on Argento's The Stendhal Syndrome. Argento had requested Morricone to change some of the music, which led to a sort of scandal in Italy, and in Argento's words, after Morricone stormed off, Argento was left to direct the music. American actor Michael Brandon leads the cast. He was hired following his performance in Lovers and Other Strangers, 1970, which Argento felt was a powerful performance. His role was also considered for Michael York, Terence Stamp, and Jean-Louis Trintignant, to name a few. Brandon is convincing when he's playing the drums, but beyond this, his performance doesn't really add much dimension to the character, whereas, hypothetically, Trintignant would surely have been able to express the deeper dimensions of the character, but probably would have fumbled the moments when made to play drums, if this bit from Deadly Sweet is any indicator. American actor Mimsy Farmer is Roberto's wife, Nina. She was born in 1945 in Chicago, Illinois, and made her film debut in 1961. She garnered some much-deserved attention for her role in More, 1969, a counterculture romance film by Barbara Schroeder. Her work on this film was also her way into Italian cinema. Her role in Flies is a tad flat, although she makes up for it near the end. She seems to have no on-screen chemistry with Brandon, but this may have been a tactical decision by Argento. After this film, Farmer would star in the 1975 giallo film Autopsy. Plus, she would go on to appear in Lucio Fulci's The Black Cat, 1981, and Ruggero Deodato's Body Count, 1987, before her retirement from film in the early 1990s. Jean-Pierre Marielle steals the show, it must be said. His character comes off as a stock caricature of gay men in the 1970s, but Marielle brings an authenticity to the role, charged with much-needed humanity and much appreciated humor, and ultimately becomes one of the greatest performances in Argento's canon of films. Spaghetti Western icon Bud Spencer also is in the film. Real name, Carlo Pedasoli, he plays Roberto's wise friend who is a bit of a wayfarer. Spencer was a beloved star at this time, having appeared in The Five-Man Army, 1969, which was co-written by Argento, as well as the best friend character in the spaghetti western comedy They Call Me Trinity, 1970, where he starred alongside Terence Hill.
He's the guy who's the talk of the town with the restless guy.
Get going.
You like to see that again?
Cut it out.
Did you get it?
Spencer says he took the role because he both wanted to support Argento and to prove that he could play variegated roles, although I'll say I do feel a similarity to his role in Trinity. He is surely an entertaining character with some of the best lines of dialogue in the script, and interestingly enough, the character's nickname of God was a holdover from the book which The Bird with the Crystal Plumage was directly inspired from, The Screaming Mimi by Frederick Brown. Here is some IMDb trivia for the film. Because of the falling out with Ennio Morricone, Argento would adopt Goblin, the rock group, as his new main composer. A slow-motion bullet effect is used in the film, predating The Matrix, 1999, as well as many Hong Kong action films. Deep Purple was originally considered for the soundtrack. The Italian poster for Dario Argento's earlier film, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, can be seen in a street shot as Roberto drives through the city. In the United States, the soundtrack by Ennio Morricone was available on CD long before the movie itself, which was unavailable until early 2009. It was Jean-Pierre Marielle's idea to make his character gay. Some of the earliest cast considerations for the main role of Roberto Tobias also included Tom Courtenay, James Taylor, and Ringo Starr. Bud Spencer took the role of Godfrey in the film as a favor for Dario Argento, who he became lifelong friends with during the shooting of two westerns the latter had written, Today We Kill, Tomorrow We Die, 1968, and The Five-Man Army, 1969. He did not take a fee for his services, but asked not to have his likeness used to promote the film. This was originally intended to be Dario Argento's swan song to the giallo genre. This would later change once The 5 Days, 1973, did poorly at the box office. A version shown in the United States is dubbed in English. The title, cast, credits, and all text within the film are in Italian. In the final scene, the dialogue suddenly alternates between English and Italian. Michael York was originally cast in the role of Roberto, but had to withdraw when Zeppelin, 1971, went over schedule. The moment involving a slow-motion car crash in the end took 12 different cars to be wrecked in order to get the effect Dario Argento wanted. This is the only movie of Dario Argento's classic gialli in which he doesn't show us the assassin in the first sequence. Dario Argento originally didn't want to use the image caught in the retina plot device since it was too fantastic for the giallo genre, but when Carlo Rambaldi showed him how the effect would look like in the finished film, he changed his mind. Thank you for watching this overview-only video. Don't miss the full overview, review, and GialliTally for Four Flies on Grey Velvet next week. As of right now, you can find the movie streaming on Plex and on YouTube. Don't forget to like this video and join me next week to see the rest of this review. Comment your predictions for the AZ score for the movie and the final GialliTally score. Check out the King in Giallo Patreon, $3 for early access and the viewings. That is over 20 full movie viewings and early access to the YouTube content over a month before the videos go live. The $5 tier has all the Patreon exclusive content. The King in Giallo podcast, the Giallo adjacent podcast, the Rat Hole Burn movie reviews, the Giallo Reads book reviews, plus more. Thank you very much for your continued support. This is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo, and if nothing else, I'll see you next time.
Go!